Welcome to What to Watch Wednesdays, hosted by someone's favorite film buff, Nathan. I love movies and I want to share that with you. From old originals to cult classics and foreign favorites, along with straight up drivel, WWW is your place for all things movies. Stick around and we'll leave you with a movie to watch over the weekend with your family or that special someone. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. 88.1 The Burg, your Music Central. Welcome back to What to Watch Wednesdays. My name is Nathan, and we are going to be talking about some movies tonight. I'm very excited to talk about movies. I have an entire radio show dedicated to talking about them, and I get to talk about them. So let's kind of introduce our movies of the night, because I talk about movies, and this is a movie show. Welcome to the movie show, everybody. It's called The Movie Show. No, it's called What to Watch Wednesdays. At any rate, so our movies tonight is a trilogy. But before I kind of get into the actual specifics of said trilogy, I think I want to break down that concept just a little bit. Trilogies are very big in the world of cinema. As basically everybody knows, we have the Star Wars trilogy, and we have the Star Wars trilogy, and the Star Wars trilogy. Specifically, we've got the original, we've got the sequels, we've got the prequels. At this point, it's a trilogy of trilogies, and that's just Star Wars. There are so many movies that are fit into this category of having a trilogy or a series of movies all built around a specific idea or a specific story that it wants to tell. But that's not what we're going to be talking about tonight. As a matter of fact, we have kind of a fringe group that we're going to be talking about, which is movies that are kind of partially related through the use of the same director or same visual style or a similar sort of idea, same sort of, I guess, overall feel to them. Movies that are kind of connected, like the Dollars trilogy starring Clint Eastwood, like For a Fistful of Dollars, For a Few Dollars More, and then The Good, Bad, and the Ugly. They're not technically all connected, and even if they are, they go in reverse order, but they all have Clint Eastwood in them, so it counts. Except I lied again, because we're not even going to be talking about that kind of trilogy. What we're going to be talking about is an unofficial trilogy of movies, a series of 3 movies that I personally really like to connect together, and I think they fit together thematically. I don't want to get into too many specific details because we got to take a break for some quick music before we jump into them, but just keep in mind that our 3 movies on the watch list tonight are going to be Point Blank from 1967, Tokyo Drifter from 1966, and The Yakuza from 1974. And I personally like to refer to these 3 as the Revenge Trilogy. 88.1 The Burg, your Music Central. Welcome back to What to Watch Wednesdays. We are going to jump into the first movie on our watch list tonight, that being Point Blank from 1967, available now to watch on Tubi. So, to kind of break down the overall plot structure of this movie, this is about Walker, a man who is double-crossed by his friend by the name of Mal Reese and left to die in the middle of Alcatraz. After essentially escaping from Alcatraz, no, it's not the movie Escape from Alcatraz, it's called Point Blank. He just escapes from Alcatraz in this one too, and that's a weird comparison because that other one has Clint Eastwood. That's not important. The important part is, after Walker from Point Blank escapes from Alcatraz, he ends up going through downtown LA on a complete rampage in order to hunt down his ex-friend Reese, get his girl back that Reese stole from him, and more importantly, get back the money that Reese stole from him after they pulled a job on Alcatraz. Essentially, he's going on a vendetta to get himself some well-earned revenge, and it's all uphill from there, because let me tell you right now, Point Blank from 1967 is one of my favorite movies of all time, period. Hands down. Everything from the cinematography to the acting to the editing, the story, the feeling, the music, just the characters, the overall style of it, all of it is done perfectly in my opinion, and even if it's not done perfectly, I still love it no matter how it's done. So just keep that in mind. It's definitely on my top 10 list. So with that obvious unbiased opinion going into this movie, let me tell you right now that I highly recommend it for its artistic values and no other reasons whatsoever. No, I do like its overall just kind of feel and overall presentation of it self, basically. I think it's very telling. When I first watched this movie, I didn't really know what to expect, and I kind of just went into it a bit blind. And within the first 5 minutes, I'm watching the opening credits scene, and I'm just watching the way it's all structured, the music that's playing, the overall feel of it. And I remember thinking to myself, this is why I love movies. This is exactly how I want to make movies. This is the kind of movie I want to see more of. And it was made in 1967. So either they definitely made a lot more of them, or they didn't make a whole lot more of movies like it. And we have gone consistently downhill. You could argue for either point, in my opinion, but that's still not what we're going to talk about. It's time to get down to the meat of why I'm talking to you about Point Blank today. And that's for something that I mentioned earlier, and that is that Walker is out to get revenge on his friend. Keep in mind that because his friend double crosses him, steals the money that they made after like robbing some guys, and steals his girlfriend as well, he and his friend are not really on the best of terms, if you can imagine. I would be very forgiving of a friend of mine if he shot me and left me for dead in the middle of Alcatraz and stole my girlfriend. No, I definitely wouldn't be on a murderous vendetta against him in any capacity. I'm very gracious and very forgiving of a... No, I legitimately... Part of the reason why I think this movie works so well is just because of its overall drive of Walker has a good reason to get revenge. Even though he's like a petty criminal and quite obviously a bad person, you can't necessarily blame him for going after it. And it also ties nicely into why I'm talking about these three movies specifically, because I like to collectively refer to them as the Revenge Trilogy. If they didn't have some overall theme of revenge in them, there wouldn't be any connection. But as it turns out, there are a lot of connections besides this overall feeling of revenge. And it more so is that revenge is the theme that springs it forward and kind of gives me a reason to actually connect all three of these movies. But there are some kind of interlocking elements, some overall style choices between the movies that really stands out in a way that kind of makes me go, okay, these have something in common besides just all revolving around a story of revenge. It's just that it makes it easier to call it an unofficial trilogy when they are all about revenge. So, to kind of get us back to Point Blank, one thing that I haven't mentioned quite yet, and will kind of serve as, a springboard into talking about our next movie in the trilogy specifically. Even though Walker is double-crossed and he's left for dead in the middle of Alcatraz, you'd think that like someone who gets shot in the back a couple times, or even head on a couple of times, because the movie's called Point Blank for a reason. He gets shot point blank in the very beginning of the movie. You'd think that he would be dead by now, and it's definitely never confirmed outright. But one of the most common theories about Point Blank is it's one of those kinds of movies that is taking place all in one big dream. It's The Wizard of Oz if it was a crime movie set in LA. No, it's not that like easy to boil down, but it is kind of at least implied, or at least thought of by many scholars and people who enjoy the movie, and kind of half confirmed by the movie's director, that it is kind of an afterlife image of Walker getting revenge on his friend, or his old friend, essentially. And one of the ways this movie achieves that overall feeling and why people tend to kind of look at it from that angle is because of its color palette and its overall style, and the weird sort of, I guess, kind of echoey sort of ambient feel of the music. The way it kind of ebbs and flows in this very weird sort of beating pattern that doesn't sound like normal music. But primarily, it's done by the color palette. Because as the movie goes on, it starts off very simplistic. Walker's wearing a normal suit. But by the middle point, after he's basically found his friend and is going to go after his bosses, after the bosses of his friend who basically ordered him to do this and to get his money back because his friend won't give it to him, he's decked out in like mustard orange suit. He like mustard orange is the best explanation for it. It is essentially the same outfit that Colonel Mustard wears in the movie adaptation of Clue. Okay, keep that in mind. This is a crime movie, a straightforward revenge thriller movie where the main character eventually wears this weird, vivid Technicolor yellow suit with a weird mustard yellow overcoat, and hunts down his friend and then sneaks around in a parking lot where everything is yellow to match his weird yellow colors. And then he invades the weird green office and invades this like weird sort of LA canals where everything is gray and industrial, and then goes to a house where everything is weird and futuristic for 1967 and the wood panels are everywhere. And that's not even including during the first like 20 minutes of the movie where he tracks down his ex-girlfriend and he's just in a room of the weirdest amount of weird rocky textures mixed with perfectly white sheets. It's such a weird color sense. The color sense in this movie is just unmatchable. And it leads perfectly into our next movie in the Revenge trilogy, which will be Tokyo Drifter. Before we jump off and go and do some more music, I want to say that if you want to hear my full take on the actual, like the massive connecting threads between all three of these movies, please tune in to What to Watch Weekends this Saturday at 9 a.m. But before that, we are going to take a quick break and we are going to talk about Tokyo Drifter after the break. So stick around. 88.1 The Burg, your Music Central. Welcome back to What to Watch Wednesdays. For our second movie on the watch list tonight, we are going to be talking about Tokyo Drifter from 1966, available to rent from Amazon. So, to kind of give us the overall plot structure of the movie, because that usually tends to help when reviewing these things, this movie follows an ex-Yakuza member by the name of Phoenix Tetsu. That's his nickname, but man, that is a cool nickname. But basically, Phoenix becomes a drifter who basically leaves the Yakuza after his boss is like, I don't want to be a Yakuza anymore. And then as he's basically just drifting throughout the Japanese countryside, he learns that his boss puts a hit out on him and goes, bring me the head of Phoenix Tetsu. I want him dead. And he goes, that's not cool, man. And basically comes back to Tokyo so that he can kill his boss and everybody else in the organization. So, what is he doing in that instance? That's right, he's seeking revenge. We're connecting the two together. For those of you who have been listening in, when I talked about Point Blank during the last break, it was a movie about a man seeking revenge against his friend. This is a movie about a man seeking revenge against his boss. It's still revenge. It's still the unofficial Revenge trilogy. And this is what makes me so excited to talk about these two movies in conjunction with each other, because if you really just look at them on the surface level, there may not be super high comparisons between them. You can't really see them. But if you start to read between the lines and you know and you have an intimate knowledge of both of them, which I definitely had an intimate knowledge of Point Blank when watching Tokyo Drifter, these similarities can kind of stand out like a sore thumb in the best way possible. Trust me, it can be really good when you're not looking for it and you find it there and you go, hey, that means I could talk about them as a trilogy. I can make my own unofficial trilogy. I don't have to rely on everybody else making their own. I can take a part of film history, cinema history as itself, and make it my own. I am the master of my own destiny. I'm going to stop like preaching like I don't know, some kind of preacher going, the Lord shall manifest your own destiny. I don't even know where I'm going with this analogy. I'm going to stop, back up, and tell you right now how Tokyo Drifter and Point Blank are similar, is what I'm going to do. So we'll do that. As I've mentioned with Point Blank, one of Point Blank's biggest strengths is its overall commitment to possibly taking place in this very weird dream sequence throughout the entire movie. And the way they achieve that is by throwing in multiple vivid colors, such as the striking yellows, a very weird green, things like this sort of overall yellow within a parking garage that contrasts nicely with the main actor's suit, which also incorporates a lot of yellow into it. Of course, there's the normal sort of red feelings and stuff like that, and this overall also feeling of white everywhere. There's a lot of color theory on display within the movie Point Blank. Tokyo Drifter is a great comparison to that movie because Tokyo Drifter is notorious for having all of the vivid colors of the rainbow. Every single one. Can you imagine watching a movie where it's like, instead of it being all washed out in gray or brown or black and white, you are basically playing this game with yourself and with the person that you're watching it with to go, hey, I wonder what color they're going to use in the next shot. And then you're wrong, but you're still going, hey, look, there's that patch of very bright green right there. There's a patch of yellow. There's red. There's blue. There's purple. There's I don't know, the mix between the light blue and the light yellow. I'm not even sure that's actually in the movie, but it might as well be. Because legitimately, there are so many examples of just this bright poppy color everywhere in Tokyo Drifter. And I said that correctly. I did not mean that you're playing the game of, oh, which color is going to represent this scene? I said shot, and I meant shot. Every single shot has something standing out about it. Every single one. You can hold me to that. There is something visually popping in every single shot of this movie. And part of the reason for that is because the director of the movie, a man by the name of Seijun Suzuki, decided that movies needed to just be fun. They didn't really have to have any deep themes to it or have this overall feel of, like, I guess, telling an actual story. He was just like, how do I have fun when making a movie? The studio is just like not giving me any budget and I want to have fun. I'm going to have fun. You can't stop me. And man, did they not stop him. Well, they definitely tried to, and they may have it in a couple instances, but I'll just say, thankfully, they didn't stop him at Tokyo Drifter. He went all out for this one. And honestly, for that reason alone, it just shares its similarities with Point Blank in terms of how they just mess around with the colors and really make everything visually pop in a movie that's kind of a standard storyline, or could be seen as a more standard storyline in terms of its like where it's kind of connected culturally. For Point Blank being set in like downtown Los Angeles, being Left 4 Dead on Alcatraz, being about a crime, like a criminal trying to get some money back from an old friend of his and kind of taking down the organization that he's a part of. That all sounds like a standard 1960s crime movie, doesn't it? But it's got that extra layer of it, of being set in maybe a dream sequence with a lot of vivid colors everywhere and his suit changing colors with those scene colors. Man, words are very good for me right now. Here's the point. It's got the basic plot with extra elements thrown into it. Tokyo Drifter, while not to Americans doesn't seem like a super generic storyline, it's definitely more common in places like Japan where this movie was made. It's about the Yakuza. And it definitely, after seeing some movies about Yakuza, they can be a little more convoluted, but even the generic ones definitely have that feeling of betrayal, or it's definitely not uncommon for Yakuza movies to be a little convoluted here and there. But the overall idea of being betrayed by your old boss and going back to kill him is definitely something that's been used in a Yakuza movie before. I've seen that plotline unfold before outside of Tokyo Drifter. But again, what makes Tokyo Drifter stand out? Color everywhere. Look at all this color. It's so weird and goofy and out there. And of course, it is about revenge. It's about him going back to kill his old boss. So again, we've got two very nice through lines to connect it to Point Blank. Its use of color and its use of revenge as a main plot point in the story. And it's nice to say that after kind of crafting this unofficial revenge trilogy, I was thinking to myself, well, okay, what movie kind of connects to these two? What could possibly fill in this gap? Because in order to have an unofficial trilogy, you kind of need a third movie. I'm happy to say that our next movie on the watch list tonight is going to answer that question very specifically. And I guess I need not tell you anything more than the title of our next movie, which is The Yakuza. Doesn't that just tell you right now that there's gonna be some form of connecting thread? This movie is about the Yakuza. The next movie is called literally The Yakuza. I'm extremely excited to talk about it. And again, if you want to hear the full story of how I came up with the Revenge Trilogy then please tune in to What to Watch Weekends this Saturday at 9 a.m. But until then, we are going to take a quick break for some music, and we're going to come back with the Yakuza. So stick around for that. 88.1 The Burg, your Music Central. Welcome back to What to Watch Wednesdays. For our last movie on the watch list tonight, we are going to be taking a look at The Yakuza from 1974, available to watch on Amazon. Before we get into the stuff that I'm really excited to talk about, we should definitely break down the overall plot of the movie. So let's do that. This movie is about Harry Kilmer, a World War II veteran who is also a retired private eye. He is enlisted by one of his old war buddies to go and get his kidnapped daughter back from the Yakuza. The friend is the one who has the kidnapped daughter. It's not Harry Kilmer's daughter. It is the friend's daughter. So because Harry Kilmer fought in Japan with this guy, they have ties to Japan, and so Harry Kilmer goes back to Japan in order to get the daughter back. Along the way, he meets up with his old girlfriend from Japan after he got out of the war. They basically broke up after her brother came back to town. And her brother, by the name of Tanaka Ken, is also connected with the Yakuza, and so Harry Kilmer decides to enlist Tanaka Ken in order to help him find this daughter. In a way, Harry Kilmer is basically being caught up in his friend's sort of story of revenge against the Yakuza for kidnapping his daughter. See, it's all connected. It's a revenge trilogy. It's got Point Blank about a guy getting personal revenge against his old friend. We've got Tokyo Drifter, a guy who wants to get revenge against his boss for basically ostracizing him and then putting out a hit on him. And now we've got the Yakuza, where Harry Kilmer, the main character, is going through the motions to exact revenge on the Yakuza for kidnapping a daughter. It still all counts. It's all connected. I am not a conspiracy theorist. These movies are connected for a reason, and I'm talking about them in a connected way for a very specific reason. That's the main one. So, again, I'm very excited for this one. For different reasons than Point Blank and Tokyo Drifter. I personally, of course, Point Blank is one of my favorite movies of all time. Tokyo Drifter is a movie that I really like because it's extremely fun. And the Yakuza is a very different kind of movie to me. Personally, I've never run into a movie quite like the Yakuza whenever I've been watching movies. Usually sometimes the movie is very good and I really like it, and maybe there's like one or two things I'd change about it or wish were changed about it. Or sometimes there's a movie that I watched and it's just kind of middle of the road. There's nothing much to say. It's kind of generic. If anything, it's kind of worse than a bad movie because I'm just in pain going like, what am I supposed to feel? I feel nothing. And then there are movies that are so incredibly bad that it's just like incredibly funny to rip off of them, or to just like go, I'm still in pain watching this because it's so bad. That's kind of the spectrum of emotions, but there's a bit of a part just in the middle that's or above the middle line of that I think there's only one movie I've seen in the last 2 years that falls into this specific category. It's the kind of movie that's very middle of the road, and it has basically all the elements of a working story, of a working movie. It could have been a very good movie, except something's off about it. Some of the things needed a little more time in the oven, or could have been redone in just a different way, or maybe it just doesn't fit all together, but it has all the elements it needs. And of course, I think there are other movies like that I've seen in the past few years. But the movie that immediately comes to mind is The Yakuza from 1974, the movie I'm talking about right now, because it stood out to me as almost a puzzle, right? Making a movie is a lot like a puzzle. You have all the footage that you're going to edit down into a finished movie. You've got all the parts, like the actors, all the lines that they deliver, the way the script is written, all their action scenes, all of the ways that you mesh the cinematography together and blend the story and tell the story, right? And normally you like to place those elements in order, or if you place them out of order, there's a specific reason you do that. The Yakuza is unique in a way that it has all of the elements and it feels like it's trying so hard to put them into the correct order, but they fumble a little bit, and some of those pieces are placed in the wrong way. The best analogy I can honestly use to use that puzzle piece sort of example is imagine you get a jigsaw puzzle, this very nice big jigsaw puzzle that has a picture of a cherry blossom printed on it. And you really like this picture of a cherry blossom. You really like, I personally really love cherry blossoms. I think they're beautiful, especially the ones we have here in the Japanese garden on campus. Ooh, they're just so nice to look at. And it works because it's about Yakuza. So it's set in Japan, and there are a lot of cherry blossoms in Japan because I've seen them in a Japanese garden. At any rate, so I don't get off track with the analogy, follow me for a few more seconds here as I tell you, imagine you get this jigsaw puzzle of a cherry blossom and you decide to yourself, I'm going to build this all out. I'm going to put every piece exactly where it needs to be. But over the course of doing that, you get a little confused, and at least 5 of those pieces are put on their side in a wrong way that still technically fits together, but not perfectly. Some of the points maybe edge out a little bit. Maybe it's kind of causing issues up the chain of this certain column of puzzle pieces. And now you've got a very partially lopsided looking cherry blossom. It still looks good, most of it. There's a good 75 to at least 50 to 75% of it is still looking very good. But those lopsided parts definitely start to stick out and you go, well, it's not all in order. It should be in a better order. That is a perfect visual metaphor to explain to you what the movie The Yakuza is like in terms of its plot, in terms of its editing, in terms of how the story flows, heck, even down to the moment-to-moment dialogue. That is how The Yakuza flows. And that astounds me as a movie experience because there are so many minor things that you could have changed around, or there are certain ways that it's done in a possibly clunky way that works itself around to still looking good. A best example would be like, well, the sky pieces are out of order, but who's going to notice that? Some of those pieces are just like a deep navy blue. Nobody's going to notice it if it were an actual picture. It's just going to look maybe a bit twisted there. If you zoom it in and look at that individual piece from a distance, it looks perfectly fine and it functions on its own. And then there are some pieces that are like the individual moment-to-moment dialogue pieces that are specifically making up the trunk of the tree. And you go, that shouldn't go there. That's out of order. That's twisted. That's weird. Why is it doing that? And that's exactly what the Yakuza feels like. And it feels so interesting to me because I feel like if I had the time and energy, I'd read the screenplay. And if I was alive during 1974, I would have loved to be in the editing room and figuring out, and the writing room and figure out exactly what they did to make it go out of order. I'd love to re-edit this movie, specifically its screenplay, even the way the movie itself is just edited. I'd love to have a copy of it so I could throw it in an editing program and figure out exactly how you could rearrange the scenes and still keep all the footage that they already have there, but also rearrange it in a way that works. And that, to me, is so much better than a movie that's just mediocre, a movie that possibly fails, but you can still see every conceivable angle that it could have totally worked. That is so much more inspiring to a person like me who wants to make movies, who wants to put them together and have them flow in a way that works. And speaking of movies in a way that works, I have to wrap this up. And so the last thing I'll say is that if you really want to hear me go on and on about how the Yakuza's elements, as out of order as they may be, are connected to Point Blank and Tokyo Drifter, then again, please listen in to What to Watch Weekends. I am very passionate about all 3 of these movies for 3 very different reasons, and I cannot go into any more depth than I've gone into tonight. So please tune in to What to Watch Weekends this Saturday at 9 a.m. Please follow What to Watch Wednesdays at What to Watch Wednesdays, all one word, no caps, no spaces, on Instagram, because I could talk about these movies for a lot longer than the amount of time I had to talk about them tonight. I just wanted to give the general overview, and I'm going to leave it at that. Please listen in to What to Watch Weekends, and thank you for listening in to What to Watch Wednesdays. I will be back on What to Watch Wednesdays next Wednesday, almost said Saturday again, next Wednesday from 8 to 9 p.m. So this is Nathan signing off, and I will see you, or if possible, you will all be listening back into me next week. See you then.